Today, we're jumping right into the rapidly shifting, honestly quite sensitive situation over in the Middle East. We're talking specifically about the May 13th drone strikes in Lebanon and that, well, highly fragile ceasefire that's currently hanging in the balance. There are so many moving parts and contrasting reports here, so we're leaning straight on Associated Press reporting to unpack the immediate action on the ground, the deep historical context, and the diplomatic scramble happening right now. Let's just get right into it. It's Wednesday, May 13th, and I want you to really picture the geography for a second. We're looking at a major, bustling coastal highway in Lebanon. This isn't some remote, isolated dirt road we're talking about. It's the primary freeway linking the capital, Beirut, right down to the southern port city of Sidon. According to the AP, Israeli drones carried out strikes targeting vehicles right along this massive transport artery. State media actually reported that 2 drone attacks hit directly on that highway, while a third hit the nearby town of Saadiyat. Then, a bit later in the early afternoon, a 4th strike hit another car right at Sidon's northern entrance. An AP photographer on the ground literally saw the bodies of 3 people killed in 2 of the strikes near the coastal towns of Barja and G. Honestly, grasping this setting, a highly trafficked civilian route in broad daylight, is our first absolutely crucial step in understanding the intensity of what went down on Wednesday.
Okay, let's dive into this because when we analyze an event like this, it is so critical to look at the contrasting reports. On one hand, you have the official report from the Lebanese Health Ministry stating that these strikes killed 8 people in total. And tragically, that number includes a woman and her 2 children. The ministry confirmed the 3 strikes, but didn't actually specify how many people were in each individual car. Now, on the flip side, the Israeli military stated that their forces struck Hezbollah infrastructure across several areas in southern Lebanon, and they explicitly noted that these strikes happened hours after they'd issued evacuation warnings to residents of 6 southern villages. So you have this really stark contrast, right? Devastating human casualties reported by Lebanese officials sitting right alongside the stated military objectives and the prior warnings cited by the Israeli military.
To truly make sense of these May 13th strikes, we kind of have to zoom out for a second. This current phase of the Israel-Hezbollah war really kicked off on March 2nd. The AP reports this started when the Lebanese militant group fired rockets into northern Israel, which, by the way, happened just 2 days after the United States and Israel attacked Iran. From that flashpoint, we jump forward to April 17th. That's when a U.S.-brokered ceasefire officially went into effect to try and halt the violence. But as we follow the timeline to May 13th, we hit the drone strikes we literally just talked about. Airstrikes hit various towns in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah claimed they were launching more attacks on Israel. Basically, both sides have just kept actively exchanging fire. And finally, looking ahead on our timeline, we have scheduled diplomatic talks in Washington set for Thursday. So you can see this rapid progression, right? An escalation, an attempted pause that quickly fractured, and now this urgent push for diplomatic talks.
2,882. That is the total number of people killed since this war began back on March 2nd. It's a genuinely sobering figure, and it comes directly from the Lebanese health minister, Rakan Nasruddin. Look, when we get super deep into the weeds of military strategy and geopolitical maneuvering, it is so easy to lose sight of the immense human cost. This isn't just a data point on a chart. It represents a massive, tragic loss of human life concentrated into just a few short months. This kind of death toll fundamentally alters entire communities, and it really underscores exactly why the stakes for any upcoming negotiations are just incredibly high.
And that grim reality definitely extends to the wounded, numbering 8,786. Again, citing the Lebanese health minister, this is the total number of people wounded across the entire conflict so far. When you pair that with the death toll we just looked at, the sheer scale of the physical devastation really comes into sharp focus. To put it into perspective, we are talking about emergency responders, hospitals, and everyday citizens dealing with the massive fallout of nearly 9,000 injuries since early March. You absolutely have to acknowledge the gravity of this physical and human toll to understand the extreme urgency that's driving international actors to the negotiating table right now. And this brilliantly illustrates the huge disconnect between diplomatic agreements and reality on the ground. Earlier, we mentioned that U.S. brokered ceasefire from April 17th. Now, normally when you hear ceasefire, you think, well, a full stop to the violence, right? But the numbers here tell a completely different story. Since that April 17th ceasefire supposedly began, 380 people have been killed and another 1,122 have been wounded. So the main takeaway here is that the conflict has remained highly active and exceptionally deadly, despite official declarations. The daily ongoing exchanges of fire between Israeli forces and Hezbollah are continuously driving these casualty numbers up. It severely complicates the entire diplomatic landscape. It just goes to show that simply signing an agreement on paper doesn't immediately stop the kinetic actions, the airstrikes, or the rocket fire happening in real time. But hanging over every single development we've discussed today is this immense historical weight. The Associated Press reminds us that Israel and Lebanon have been in a formal state of war since Israel was created back in 1948. That is over 7 decades of entrenched official hostility. And it's against this incredibly deep historical backdrop that Lebanon and Israel are scheduled to hold another round of direct talks in Washington on Thursday. The Trump administration is actively pushing for a breakthrough between the two neighbors. Just think about the magnitude of that effort for a second. They are trying to bridge a gap that has existed for 78 years, and they're doing it while active airstrikes are hitting highways, a recent ceasefire is clearly failing to hold, and casualties are climbing every single day. Understanding this 1948 context ensures we aren't just looking at Thursday's talks as a quick reaction to May 13th, but rather as this massive attempt to untangle generations of systemic conflict. So, all of this leaves us with the ultimate provocative question. Can diplomatic talks in Washington actually forge a lasting peace while hostilities are actively continuing on the ground? It's like a giant, almost unprecedented diplomatic puzzle. How do leaders effectively negotiate across the table in Washington when drones are actively striking vehicles and rockets are continuously being fired back home? The path to resolution here is incredibly steep for sure, and Thursday's talks will be a critical test of whether diplomacy can truly outpace the ongoing violence. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you next time.